Sup, guys? It's Toad back with you. As usual, it is Tuesday, February 18th, and we're coming off an 0-2 day last night with both college basketball games. I mean, college basketball, again, I just have not had a good season, man. What can you say? 0-2 last night. Both games were pretty close. Kansas State was in that game. That game was tied with not a lot left in the game, and they wind up losing by 5. I think you get some intentional fouls, and then you just wind up losing the game, and you're on plus. I got +3 on that one, and not 2.5, and still didn't even matter either way. Then we had Baylor. I mean, they were in the game well enough, but fell short as well. I should have mentioned, I didn't even mention it in my analysis. Another reason why I liked Baylor was that there was a huge pacing disparity in that game where Arizona likes to play fast. Baylor likes to play really slow, and Baylor's the home team. It's easier to control the pace when you're at home. It's easier to control the pace when you're a slow down team. So I liked all of that too. What can you do? And again, I mentioned Baylor's coming off that overtime game, and I think that really kind of is what wound up doing them in the end, because Baylor's been running with a 7-man rotation because they have a couple injuries. But still, I mean, that type of thing is factored into the line, except for maybe how much fatigue they really might have. But I thought it was the right spot to play them. We'll move on to today. We got big college basketball. By the way, I should say, I should be playing the hockey games, 4 Nations. I think I've been right about every single game as far as which team is going to cover the puck line at the very least, or which team is going to have value. I told you, man, the Canada game yesterday was going to be higher scoring. Canada needed to win that game to ensure that they were going to get into the finals. Finland was coming off the big upset of Sweden. Then once, I forgot to mention this, but once Canada won that game, I think it was guaranteed that the U.S. was going to be in the final against Canada. So the U.S. had no reason to show up, except they wanted to play in front of their home crowd, I guess, against Sweden. But Sweden wound up winning the game 2-1. The U.S. rested some of their players. I know Bruins player Charlie McAvoy, who was also from Boston, I think, or from Charlestown, maybe. He's from somewhere in the Boston area, I think. Charlie McAvoy, kid. I think he's on the team. He rested last night. They rested some guys. They didn't play Hellebuck in net. They played Ottinger, and he wasn't that bad, but I mean, he was worse than I don't even know who was in net for Sweden. I don't know if Allmark is back or if it was somebody else, but Ottinger was a little bit worse than that. I think the U.S. outshot Sweden and still lost the game. But still, the U.S. did not go full force in that game because they're gearing up for Thursday, which is going to be interesting. I don't know if I'm going to try to go to the game on Thursday, but it's also supposed to be snow here in the area, and we have no idea how bad it's going to be. If that game winds up getting canceled, everybody's going to flip out because hockey has to resume on Saturday. So I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen there. And the U.S. looked like they'd come to play as Chris Kreider scored like right out of the gate. He scored in the first minute last night, and then they didn't score again after that. It was looking like the U.S. was really going to show up in that game. Everybody was going crazy because Chris Kreider is a local guy, but then they didn't score again, man. Fun fact about Kreider, by the way, one of my coworkers, a bit of an older dude who I worked with at my first company, his son played hockey in high school with Chris Kreider and was like one of Chris Kreider's best friends. So my coworker knew Kreider, and I would talk to him about sports all the time, and that was like Kreider's from the North Shore of Massachusetts, man. So he's a local guy. I used to talk to my coworker there. Like we talk about sports all the time, man. I kind of miss it. Shout out to Paul. Hopefully he's doing well, man. But yeah, I had fun talking to that guy about sports, and then little did we realize at the time that Kreider was going to become like one of the best players in the NHL, because I think he was like I think he was just like new to the NHL at the time. We didn't really know. Something like that. I forget. But anyway, yeah, just a little bit of an aside there. Let's talk about college basketball here, man. I got 4 plays here. Let's get right into it. First up is not a play for me. At 6:30 p.m., Fox Sports 1. The first game up is Villanova at UConn. This is a game that almost made my card, man. I like UConn in this game. They're up from 7 to 8.5, though, so the line is kind of drifting a little bit. I mean, obviously, it would be a lot better to get a 7 on that if you like UConn. The key number there, it's the 3-score threshold. I think the spot sets up decently for UConn in this game because it is a revenge spot. UConn lost on the road to Villanova earlier this year by 2. So I think that should keep UConn focused. But UConn also lost to Seton Hall, man, in their last game, which we know that was a ridiculous, 13.5-point upset for Seton Hall. Really bad game for UConn. It was a second straight road game for them, and they were coming up playing Marquette, St. John's, and Creighton all in a row. Creighton on the road, too, and then having to come back. So wasn't an easy spot for UConn. Probably still should have won the game straight up, though, against a very bad Seton Hall team. So I don't know. But now UConn's coming back home. Because of all that, I think UConn is going to be focused. And they also lost their last home game on this floor to St. John's. So I would imagine UConn's going to be focused for all those reasons. Villanova should be focused as well, though. I mean, Villanova needs wins, man, because they're on the bubble. So I don't think they're just going to not show up in this game either. Both teams are going to show up. Villanova just had an ugly loss to Providence. I was on Providence in that game because Villanova was coming off the St. John's win, which I was on Villanova in that game too. So, I was reading Villanova correctly there, and Villanova was in the letdown spot coming off of that. It is a second straight road game for them, though. They did already beat UConn, but again, you got to think they're still going to be focused on UConn because it is UConn. They're the returning champs. They're going to make the tournament, and Villanova has an outside chance of it if they get some wins here. So I will stay away, but when you get both teams being focused, you get the better team focused like UConn. That's the way that I would lean. And both of these teams are kind of mirror images of each other, which is weird. They both play slow, but they both are actually not very good defensively, and they're both offensively efficient. They're very offensive in how they play. It's just weird to see slow down teams like that be way better on offense than defense. That is what KenPom has. But that's also one other hesitation that I have with laying a big number with UConn here is that when you have both teams slowing the game down, you got a total that's down from 141.5 to 139. Points are going to be a little bit harder to come by, so it's a little bit more difficult to lay the points in that situation. I still would lean to UConn, but not a play for me. Number 7, Texas A&M is at number 21, Mississippi State. This is going to be an interesting one, man. Ranked matchup, obviously. Mississippi State, I believe, is the home favorite in this one. Yeah, they're a 2-point favorite. They look anti-public, so it looks like you get, not only do you get an lesser-ranked home favorite here in Mississippi State, but you get a public road underdog in Texas A&M. So the market read seems to be shouting out Mississippi State in this one, and I guess that's the way I would lean because of that, but I don't really have a strong situational lean in this one. A&M, 83% of tickets, 58% of the cash, so they have more of the cash than the tickets on them. So again, they look public. Looks like some of the money is coming in the other way against Texas A&M. Texas A&M, I mean, they've kind of reached their peak at this point, I think. I mean, they are really good. Are they worthy of the 7th ranking in all of college basketball? Probably not. I mean, KenPom has them at 13th. They're a very good defensive team. They got one of the best players in college basketball, Wade Taylor IV. I keep forgetting his name. He is definitely a very good player, man. A&M's on a run right now. They've won 5 games in a row, although some of these games, many of them have been against some of the lesser teams in the SEC, really, though. I mean, the SEC is stacked, but still, some of these teams aren't that great. Now they're actually having to step back up in class. They did beat Arkansas, who's battling to try to get into the tournament. Same with Georgia, actually, and those are the last 2 wins. Now they're going back out on the road to face Mississippi State. A&M's been okay on the road. I mean, they did beat Missouri on the road, South Carolina. Who cares about that? They beat Ole Miss on the road. They lost to Texas by 1. They did lose at Kentucky, and they won at Oklahoma on the road. They've been decent on the road in this SEC slate, man. But they do have Tennessee up next as well, and that may be a big game because it's looking like it's going to be a matchup between two. Well, the rankings aren't going to change from now until then, right? So that's looking like it's going to be a or actually, is that Saturday? Maybe that's Saturday. So, yeah, the rankings don't come out until after that. I forget. No, the rankings might come out Saturday morning. I don't even know when the rankings come out, man. Maybe it's Monday. I don't know. But whatever the case is, it's basically going to be like an upcoming top 10 matchup between A&M and Tennessee. Will they completely overlook Mississippi State? Probably not, because they're also a highly ranked team. But Texas A&M's sitting pretty high right now, you would have to imagine, as the rankings makers love them right now, putting them in the as a 2 seed in the early bracket committees bracket that they have out there. They're putting them as a 2 seed, and that's separate from what the rankings people do. And the rankings have them at number 7. And then the bracketology guys, well, not bracketology guys, well, them too, but they put out that first bracket, the bracket preview that came out over the weekend, and Texas A&M was a 2 seed, and that's from the actual bracket committee. So Texas A&M probably feeling pretty high on themselves, but then the problem is Mississippi State's coming off a huge win at Ole Miss as they swept the season series with their main rival in Ole Miss, their in-state rival. Huge win for Mississippi State. Now they're coming back home. They did lose the last time they played on this Florida, so maybe they're still going to be looking to redeem themselves from that. I mean, it is a top team coming into their place, so it's not like they're going to not show up for this game. But it may be a little bit of a tougher spot for Mississippi State, after beating Ole Miss. So I don't know what I would want to do with this game, man. But the market read is on Mississippi State, but I would not want to play them coming off that game against Ole Miss. But again, Texas A&M might be feeling too high on themselves as well. So we're going to skip that one. The next game up is going to be a play for me. And I'm sorry, I forgot to put these in. I'll put them in as I go because I can type pretty fast. I'm going to take Purdue plus the points. Purdue plus 3.5. That's going to be my first play here. Number 13 at number 14 here. I know I've been singing Michigan State's praises, man, but I think the stock has gotten a little low on Purdue at this point. You can see here, Ken Baum still has Purdue as the 10th best team in the country. He's got them, I don't know what to say about the rest of it, but he does have them 10th in the country. Michigan State 17th in the country. He does have Michigan State as the better defense. He's got Purdue as the better offense. I know a lot of times I like to play the better defense, especially getting points. He does have Michigan State as the less lucky of the two teams, though there's not that much of a disparity there. Purdue likes to slow the game down. Michigan State plays kind of a mid-tempo, so they can play slow or fast. They're probably going to try to speed the game up a little bit because Purdue doesn't like to play that way, but Purdue's good enough that I think they may be able to get this game slowed down a bit, man. And Purdue has faced the 5th most difficult schedule in the country, so they've faced a more difficult schedule than Michigan State has. But I also just like the way this game sets up, man. Michigan State, they are up from 3-3 with juice, but they got 62% of tickets and only 60% of the cash. So the line, it was 3.5, and it may start coming down a little bit. We'll see what happens. I mean, Purdue plus 3, I don't really hate that either. Obviously, I mean, there's not a huge difference, even though there's a slight difference there. But Purdue, they're coming off that loss to Wisconsin, man. And that was a game where Wisconsin, basically couldn't miss. I mean, that's crazy. Purdue was coming off that game against Michigan, coming back home. They had Michigan State up next. I don't know if they really overlooked Wisconsin, but man, Wisconsin just had a good game, shot out of their minds. I mean, Purdue was winning this game early. Looked like it was going to be a win for Purdue. I said that I kind of leaned to Purdue in this game, and then we got into the second half, and Purdue had stretches where they just didn't score. And Wisconsin just shot crazy in this game, man. Wisconsin, 61.5% from field goal percentage. I think Wisconsin only missed 2 two-pointers in the entire second half. Absolutely ridiculous. I highly doubt that happens again. Only 3 turnovers for Wisconsin on the road, too. I mean, I know Purdue's going to be on the road here, but there's no way their opponent is going to shoot 61.5% from the field against them again. You know that after something like that happens, Purdue, Matt Painter there, he's going to be pissed. They're going to be cleaning up their act. So I'm going to expect a better defensive showing out of Purdue coming into this game, even though Purdue, yeah, they have problems defending in the paint. We do know this with Zach Edey not there anymore. Purdue is more about guard play now, very experienced guard play. Those same guards they had last year with Braden Smith, and I forget who else they have. But Purdue didn't even really have a bad statistical game in that game. It was just Wisconsin couldn't miss at all, and it was just, I consider that to be kind of an outlier. So I do like Purdue here, and as I said, Ken Baum does have Purdue as the higher ranked team. He's got Purdue only losing this game, I think, by 2 points. I know I've been saying Michigan State is good. I've been hyping them up all year, but now Michigan State's coming off that crazy win at Illinois. I'll talk about them in a minute. Illinois is underranked right now, and Illinois was a 6.5-point favorite in this game. Even as an unranked team against a ranked Michigan State opponent here, Illinois, yeah, I mean, they're definitely I would say they're being undervalued by the rankings committee at this point pretty severely, and that's going to continue after what happened in this game. But Illinois was winning this game big in the first half. They were winning by double digits. Then Michigan State came back. They got into the lead. They made a game of it. Nice comeback from Michigan State. Got to give them credit. Then Illinois was winning the game by 1 as the game was tight for a while. For almost the entirety of the second half, the game was close. Illinois had the lead with 8.5 minutes left, and they never scored again. Michigan State scored 15 unanswered points, and Illinois lost the game. Again, highly doubt that that's going to happen again. Illinois, yeah, I mean, so, well, actually, I'm going to talk about Illinois in a second. I thought I was talking about the Illinois game for a minute because I'm projecting here. I'm going to be on Illinois today as well. But Michigan State, yeah, I mean, their opponent is not going to go the last 8.5 minutes with no points, man. That's not going to happen again. That's a complete outlier as well. Illinois had a terrible shooting game, 38.1% from the field, 21.2 from 3. Illinois is they're not great offensively this year as far as like versus what they were last year, but Illinois is actually better defensively than they were last year, and their offense is still not that bad. So this was an outlier. Michigan State, 41.7% from 3. That's a bit high as well. So I think that's a little bit of an outlier. That was a huge win for Michigan State, really. A little bit of an outlier performance. And the thing that kind of puts me over the edge here as far as fading Michigan State is this right here. You know, Michigan State was celebrating a bit because Tom Izzo became the sole winningest coach in Big Ten history. He was tied with Bobby Knight, and he got that. We knew he was going to get the win at some point, obviously. So he got the win, and now he's the winningest Big Ten coach ever. So you got to think that they celebrated a bit. And coming into this game, they may be a little bit hungover, even though I know it's Purdue, but they're catching Purdue at a time where Purdue's going to be focused. Michigan State is favored and maybe favored by more than what they should be. So we got all that going on in this game. I think the line is a little bit off from where it should be, as Ken Palm is at least telling you that. Although I should look at, there are some other sites like Bart Torvik and Evan Maya, which I can't really read Evan Maya's site as much. I don't know. That site, I don't love it as much. Bart Torvik I do like, and most of his site is free, I'm pretty sure. So I usually just look at Ken Palm for the most part, though. But anyway, Michigan State coming off that, and the last time they had that big win, the win that tied Tom Izzo with Bobby Knight when they beat Oregon, they came out flat in the next game. They lost at home as a big favorite to Indiana. So you may see another somewhat flat performance, even though I know Purdue is not Indiana. You're going to step up for Purdue, but still, I think you got to think that Michigan State was celebrating. Come back home, you got to think everybody on campus is, hyping them up and probably just going crazy because Izzo just got that record. So I don't like how this sets up. I like the spot for Purdue. And like I said, Purdue is the better of the teams offensively, although not defensively. But their defense isn't that bad either. So give me Purdue. Scott, thank you, man. That is Top Lobs, his work there on the thumbnails there. Yeah, he gave me the new thumbnails. I like it. He went neon green for me as well with the because that's like one of my favorite colors, and that's what I use for the what do you call it, the banners and whatever, and the names. All right. Next up, I do have another play here, which is going to be a money line play. Let me get it in here because I don't have any of them in the banners right now. I mean, it's going to be Davidson. I believe the play was at minus 130. I mean, if you want to lay the points, I would not be really mad at you, but I prefer the money line, as I've talked about recently. It's more advantageous to take the money line, even though I know it didn't work out last night. But Davidson, they're down from 2.5 to 2, but I like how this sets up for Davidson, man, against Loyola Chicago. I don't think Loyola Chicago's in a particularly good spot here. They're coming off a big win over St. Louis. They knocked St. Louis down. St. Louis was right with them in the A10 standings, and they're still right behind them. So that's a big win for Loyola against St. Louis. And then up next, after they go on the road to Davidson, they got to play Dayton, George Washington, and then St. Louis again. So those three games are all pretty big, even though I know George Washington's kind of fallen down the standings a little bit. Dayton is a huge game up next because they're right ahead of Loyola in the standings. It would be even better if they were facing George Mason after that, but still, I think they may very well overlook Davidson here, as Davidson's kind of down this year. They're kind of just sitting towards the bottom of the conference to some degree, but they're not that bad. They're still a competitive team in this conference, in my opinion. And Loyola Chicago, they haven't been as great on the road in conference play. In these true road games in conference, let me see what it is. They beat LaSalle, but I mean, that's LaSalle. They suck. Lost to St. Joe's horribly. Got absolutely blown out by St. Joe's, 93-57. They lost in a competitive game to Dayton. Lost at George Mason competitively, so that wasn't that bad either, but still 1-3, 1-4 because they lost by double digits at Duquesne as well. And then they beat Richmond, but they had to go into overtime to do that, and Richmond is the worst team in the A-10. So Loyola Chicago is only 2-4 on the road in conference play, and the only 2 wins are against the worst 2 teams, LaSalle, Richmond, well, maybe Fordham is the worst, but 2 of the worst 3, let's say. So Loyola Chicago hasn't done that well on the road. As far as Davidson is concerned, again, like I said, I think they're flying under the radar a little bit, and I think it almost looks a little bit easy to grab the points with the team with the better record, with Loyola Chicago's. Davidson's record looks even a little bit uglier as they're sitting at 10 losses here. Davidson just lost at home to George Washington, so I think they're going to want to redeem themselves. They're just staying at home here. George Washington, I mean, they're an okay team, but again, yeah, kind of sliding down the standings a little bit. You got to think Davidson will show up for a game against Loyola Chicago, who's been playing pretty well this season. And Davidson, they've been decent enough at home, I would say. I mean, I wouldn't say they've been great at home. At home in conference play, they beat Duquesne, they beat Fordham, they lost to St. Joe's, lost competitively to George Mason, beat Richmond. So whatever that amounts to, what is that, 4-1 or something like that, 4-2, 3-2, whatever it is. They have a winning home record at home, though, so at least there is that. And then as far as the KenPom rankings are concerned, KenPom actually has Davidson as the better team. So if that's the case, I don't know if they're injuries or what, but he has them above Loyola Chicago by 14 ranking spots. So that means that this line is pretty short if Davidson isn't even getting a full home court here. Davidson is the better offense at 81st in the country. They are the worst of the 2 defenses. Loyola is the better defense, which again, sometimes I do like to play the better defense getting points, but in this spot I do not. He's got Davidson lower in the luck index. Loyola's up at 97th in luck, so they've been a little bit luckier. And Davidson is a slowdown team. They're more of a slowdown team than Loyola Chicago is. So Davidson may try to slow this game down and kind of irritate Loyola Chicago and get that game into an annoying half-court game. So give me Davidson in that one. Next up, I'm not going to play this. This is close to being a play for me. I like Lipscomb in this game against Eastern Kentucky. They're laying 3.5 points on the road. And one of the main reasons I like them is because the last game they lost was at home to Eastern Kentucky. They lost by 9 points at home. They already got revenge for their other conference home loss against Queens. They went on the road and beat them. So their only other home loss that's unavenged right now in conference is Eastern Kentucky, and that's who they're playing right now. Although they are coming off a win over Florida Gulf Coast, who's been decent. That's a decent win, and they got North Alabama up next, and North Alabama is sitting atop the conference right now, so that is a huge game. So that's one worry that I have, is that maybe it'll be a look-ahead spot for Lipscomb. So that's like the one, actually, that's like the one main thing that keeps me off of this, but you got to expect Lipscomb will show up focused for this just because Eastern Kentucky did get them on their home floor. And Eastern Kentucky, they just beat Queens. That's a pretty big win for them. I know this is going to be a second straight big game, so I don't know if that means they're going to tire out, but they are still staying at home, though, so they don't have travel here. But a lot of times when a team, it's a little bit lesser of a team, although I think Queens is actually, as I've been saying, Queens isn't as good as they look, but still a big game. And you have a team like Eastern Kentucky here that's playing 2 big games in a row. You may see them tire out a little bit. So I lean to Lipscomb in that game for those reasons, but not going to be a play for me. Let me see. Lipscomb sitting at a 3.5 point favorite, like no movement on this. And I believe KenPom might have them winning by about 4 or something like that. Let's keep going, man. I'm basically just going to hit the games that I'm on because I'm playing most of the other big games, and then I'll get out of here. Illinois at Wisconsin. I got to play on this one as well. Hopefully I'm not skipping it. I think, what did I say? I have 4 plays or 5? I think I have 5. Illinois plus 4 is going to be a play for me, even though I know KenPom does have Wisconsin ranked as the better team now. But he has this line right at 4. Illinois, surprisingly, is actually the better defense out of the 2. Wisconsin actually much better offensively than defensively. And Illinois almost as good in offensive efficiency as Wisconsin. So Illinois, yeah, they're down at 20th in KenPom now as they've been kind of sliding, but he still has them as deserving of being a ranked team, and now they're not. Yes, Wisconsin is really good, but as I'll talk about in a minute, the situation for Wisconsin I really don't think lines up very well either. Wisconsin, they're not really that excessive slowdown team anymore either, so that I think benefits Illinois a little bit as well, as Illinois plays really fast. Wisconsin will try to slow the game down a bit, but they don't play ridiculously slow anymore, so it's not a huge pacing disparity like it would be in the past. Illinois may be able to try to run a little bit and get this game a little bit faster, and Wisconsin may not totally Wisconsin may somewhat oblige as well. KenPom also has Illinois way down in the luck index now, 322nd in luck, and having faced the 12th most difficult schedule. So he's telling you that Illinois is better than they look at this point. I agree with that. Wisconsin, 229th in luck, so he's telling you that they're also actually better than they look, in 19th strongest schedule, but Illinois hits both of those markers as well as being even more unlucky and having faced the even more difficult schedule than Wisconsin has. So I like all that. And then looking at the situation, as I was already alluding to, Illinois didn't score against Michigan State for the last 8.5 minutes, man. I mean, that is embarrassing. I mean, I know this is a big game and you're winning the game, but you stall out and you don't score for 8.5 minutes and you wind up losing by 14. I think you're going to be focused in your next game. You got to think Brad Underwood, who I don't like, is going to be really frustrated by this and really pissed off. And you know Illinois is going to probably have a fire lit under their ass here. And as I pointed out, they had a horrible shooting performance in this game too. 38.1% from the field, 21.2% from three. I'm not sure that we're going to see that again either. I expect Illinois to shoot a bit better in this game. And again, Illinois did play much better in the first half of that game too. I think they can hang in this game. And Wisconsin, they could even be in a letdown spot here. Now that Illinois has kind of fallen down into the middle of the pack here in the Big Ten, teams may not pay attention to Illinois as much as they should now. So Illinois may sneak up on some teams now. And Illinois, especially because Illinois just lost as like a 6.5-point favorite, and Wisconsin just won as a 6.5-point underdog. So you have Illinois losing a game that they actually should have won based on who was favored, and Wisconsin winning a game that they should have lost based on who was favored. And what was that game? As I already mentioned, Wisconsin went into the Mackey Center or whatever it is at Purdue. Really difficult place to win. And they win in second straight road game for them too, and they won the game by double digits, having, as I said, an excellent second half. And whereas Illinois completely stalled out and shot horribly, Wisconsin, as I already pointed out, I won't rehash it again, but Wisconsin shot unbelievably in the second half, like basically not missing anything from 2-point range. Absolutely crazy. I don't expect that to happen again either, especially Illinois' defense. Definitely better than people think that it is this year. And again, this is also a letdown spot for Wisconsin because that win over Purdue, that was like their biggest win of the year, man. I know they beat Arizona earlier this year, which is a big win, but this game, they went on the road and they beat Purdue, and Purdue won. They didn't win the conference because Wisconsin actually won the Big Ten tournament last year, but Purdue was still like the best team in this conference last year. Purdue has been like a monster in the Big Ten for a while with Zach Edey there. Purdue made the championship game last year. So that was a huge win for Wisconsin, man. A legitimizer. Purdue was ranked as a top team in this conference this season as well, which I still kind of think that they are, even though KenPom has these two teams really close to each other now. But I think this is a spot where you got to take Illinois, and that is what I'm doing in that one for all those reasons. And it is a classic letdown spot on top of all those other reasons where I think Illinois is going to show up more focused in this one. So give me Illinois plus the points. Nancy, what's up? Thanks for hanging out. Yes, hello to Scott as well. All right. I'm wondering if Nancy actually looks like Freddy Krueger, by the way. I've always kind of wondered that. Next up, we got two more plays to discuss, and then I'll be able to get out of here in a decent amount of time. It'll be a little bit over a half hour. Here, let me get my next play in, as I don't have it in yet. This one, Arizona State plus 11.5. I think this is a bad spot for Houston, man. I'm going to grab this boatload of points with Arizona State here. I think the line is dropping a little bit, and actually maybe I'm wrong. It's gone up from 11.5 to 11.5 with juice, so maybe we can get a little bit better than 11.5 on this. I think KenPom has this one right at 11, so KenPom is kind of right in line with most of these, and he's telling you the lines are off on those first two games that I talked about with Purdue and Davidson. These other two, I mean, sometimes I will still go against what Ken Palm's numbers say. Like, I do like UConn, even though Ken Palm is saying that is a 6-point line or something. Ken Palm doesn't factor in like the current state of the team either, like injuries and stuff. So you got to watch out for like just looking at his numbers. But I don't like to fade him really when he's that far off. But sometimes I will. But in my games today, I'm not. But this is a classic spot where I got to go against Houston, man. This is a sandwich spot. Houston, yes, they're one of the best teams in the country. They just beat Arizona, and Arizona was their main competition for the top of the Big 12 right now. Houston was one game ahead of Arizona, or half game, I guess. Was it a half game? Whatever it was. Yeah, I guess it was a half game. Now with that win, they're 1.5 games ahead of Arizona. Huge win for Houston, man. And it was not only was it a win for them, but it was on the road at Arizona. That's a massive, massive win. Monster win for Houston. Close game, too. Tough, physical, grinding game. Now they have to play a second straight road game at Arizona State, who they may not really pay as much attention to. And up next, they got Iowa State and then Texas Tech. Texas Tech being a revenge game. And Iowa State, I believe they haven't played yet this year. So those are huge games as well against two teams that are ranked in the top 10 right now. This is a major sandwich spot, man. I think it's a bad spot for Houston. Should Houston win the game outright? Yeah, they should. But we're talking about taking the points here, man. We don't need Arizona State to win this game. We just need Houston to play one of their classic defensive, ridiculous, ugly, slow-down games. That's what Houston does. Arizona State's coming off losing as a favorite to TCU over the weekend. I was on TCU in that game because I said Arizona State, I mean, they were coming off that ridiculous double overtime game against Texas Tech where they fell just short as a giant underdog on the road, and they had Houston up next, so I was pretty sure that Arizona State was going to be in a really bad spot there. They were in the sandwich spot there. TCU was able to get in there and get the win, outright win as an underdog. Now I think Arizona State is going to be in the focus spot, man, after being in that bad spot and losing at home. They got Houston coming into their place. Houston's in a terrible spot. Arizona State's in a much better focus spot. And Arizona State doesn't have a whole lot left to look forward to. I think what you're going to see is the games they're going to step up for in the remaining schedule. Houston, maybe Kansas State because they lost to them, and then their big rivalry against Arizona, and then I guess Texas Tech. But when a team's basically like pretty much out of it at this point, you're going to see them just step up in these huge games, and this is one of them. This game is on ESPN2 as well, and a little bit of an added bonus. I mean, Houston, they play ridiculously slow. That's what they try to do, and they may be able to do that this game as well because they're just so good that they're usually able to slow the game down. They did it against Arizona, so they may be able to do that, and if they do, that's fine with me because if it's a slow-paced game, it's going to be more difficult to cover a huge favorite number as a road favorite here. So I like that. That's fine with me. That is what Houston likes to do. So I like that. And if Arizona State is able to try to do something as far as what they like to do as far as the pace is concerned, they like to play faster at 114th in tempo. So if they speed it up a little bit, I'm okay with that too. Arizona State, yeah, they're certainly not the better team, but they're still in the top 100 in both offense and defense. They're actually decent defensively. Top 50 in the country defensively. They face the 9th strongest schedule, and they're 247th in luck. So Ken Palm telling you they're not quite as bad as they look. This team is not really a pushover. And again, if they can play defense, if you can get this into a defensive game, maybe they could speed it up a little bit and get Houston out of their element, or even if they don't, and it becomes a slow defensive game, it has a lot of the elements where the home underdog should be able to cover a huge number like this. So Arizona State is the play in that one. You have more hair than Freddy Krueger. Well, that's good. Freddy Krueger, I mean, hopefully you're less burned than he is as well. And then we'll finish this off with maybe a square play. It's just a giant favorite here. Let me get this in. But you know, I'm playing against a classic letdown situation here. I'm going to lay the points with Marquette in Seton Hall, Marquette. I mean, this is a game that I probably wouldn't even talk about otherwise, but we know what the situation is. I already mentioned it when I talked about UConn. Seton Hall, that was their win of the year, man. They beat the returning champs, UConn, at home. Huge win for Seton Hall. Massive win. And this Seton Hall team, they're awful. They're so bad. They only had one win in conference until then, and Ken Palm has them lower than ranked 200th in the country. He has them in the bottom, like third of the entire of all of Division One. Even though they're a Big East team, he has them worse than 200th in the country. That is not good. And now they have to go on the road to Marquette. So they have to go all the way out to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and play this game against Marquette. Coming off just a monster upset win as a 13.5-point underdog. And their only other win in conference was against DePaul, who is the only team that may be worse than they are in the conference. So that was just an unbelievable win, really. I mean, I thought it was a bad spot for UConn. I really did not expect UConn to lose outright. Just a crazy upset. And now having to go out on the road, I don't like this at all. Marquette is definitely the better team. Marquette has kind of slipped down the standings, even though I know they're still ranked 16th in the country. They might be feeling a little bit more angry because Marquette got left out of the, even though they're ranked 15th or whatever, 16th, they got left out of the top 4 seeds in bracketology. They got left out of the top 16, and they were one of the teams. Them and Michigan State were like right on the border there. And I know I'm fading Michigan State today, but Michigan State got their win in that game on a Saturday. Yes, Marquette also won on Saturday, but it was a home win against DePaul by 10. I mean, that's basically just like going through the motions. Marquette had lost to UConn, St. John's, and Creighton prior to that, but 2 of those games are on the road. Difficult games for them. I mean, I'm not really going to knock them too much for those losses. Those are not horrible losses, and they bounce back from it. So now I like that because they got an easy win over a bad DePaul team. They didn't win by that much. They just kind of went through the motions, but they got a win, which is going to restore some of their confidence coming into this game. They're still staying at home. Yes, I know it's a road revenge spot for Seton Hall, but I don't look at that. That's not a thing that I look at as the only handicapping tool here. And I know road revenge is sometimes it's a big motivator. Seton Hall, I mean, they don't really even need extra motivation. Like, they should show up for a game against Milwaukee, but coming off such a monster win for a team like Seton Hall, I just don't see them being able to do it again. And with travel like this, Marquette staying at home, much bigger travel edge for Marquette. And based on Ken Baum, this line is actually short. I don't know if maybe Marquette has some injuries, but Ken Baum has this being a 20-point win for Marquette, and we're only laying 17.5 here, which it does seem like a lot, but I don't think it is in this matchup. He's got Marquette, not great, 27th in the country, but way, way better than Seton Hall is. I mean, he still has Marquette. We know who they are, man. They're pretty good. They play somewhat fast, so they're kind of in the top half of pace, where Seton Hall tries to play really slow. If Marquette's able to speed it up, I don't think Seton Hall really has the weapons to really do a whole lot against them. Marquette, they face pretty difficult schedule as well. They're top 20 defensive team still, top 35 in both offense and defense. So they're not quite as good as they were the last couple of years, but this is a spot where I just think it's an awful spot for Seton Hall. I think Seton Hall gets blown out in this game, so I will lay the points with Marquette in that one. And that's going to do it, man. Although I will point out BYU is in one of those spots where they're one of those unranked home favorites here, laying 2.5 against Kansas. But as bad as Kansas is, or as not good as Kansas is, Kansas has a lot more talent than the way that they've been performing. This is a second straight road game in elevation in Utah, but you got to think Kansas is going to show up for a game like this because they're probably going to be pissed with how everybody's shitting on them so much at this point. I think at this point, they're probably better than what the rankings are telling you they are. Ken Baum has them at 16th. I mean, I shit on them, and I hate Hunter Dickinson, so I like seeing Kansas fail, but this is a spot where even though the market kind of looks like it's begging you to take Kansas, I wouldn't do it. BYU's up from a pick 'em to 3 now, 80% of tickets, 93% of the cash. I don't really love it, though. I mean, if Kansas was in a bad spot, yeah, sure, but they're coming off just another ugly loss for them, and everybody's just making fun of them so much. They've almost fallen out of the rankings completely. You got to think that Kansas is going to show up for this one. And I had BYU on Saturday. They're coming off a nice win over Kansas State. They do have Arizona up next, so I don't know if they're really going to look ahead to Arizona. With Kansas coming into their building, they probably will still show up for the game. So it's a game where both teams probably show up, is what I'm trying to say. That's going to do it for me, man. The plays one more time. Purdue plus 3.5. Davidson money line minus 130. Illinois plus 4. Arizona State plus 11.5 or maybe 12, whatever you can get on that. Marquette minus 17.5. The Rare laying a huge favorite from me in that one. That's going to do it. All college basketball today. Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. Follow the Tower Gang Podcast. Patreon.com/Tower Gang for live pre-show, post-show, bonus content. You get to watch the current episode throughout the week. You can still watch it live without the Patreon, but we paywall it now for a week. You get all that. Go check it out. We're going to be live again 9-11 p.m. tomorrow night with another new episode. We're the most hilarious podcast out there, man, so check it out. That's going to do it. Have a good day. You as well, Nancy. Thank you. Nancy, Scott, thanks for hanging out. That's going to do it. Peace, everybody.